So the format of this discussion, so that's who I am. So the format is I'm going to take the view that actually you guys are all here for one reason and one reason only, and that is I will entitle BriForum, How Do I Keep My Directors Happy? You know, because my directors are the ones that are dragging in the iPads, and I'm going to be taking the viewpoint that actually this whole future mechanism, this whole way in which we're moving, and all these Dropbox, all this wonderful stuff, these application delivery, is actually nothing more than something being driven by a few mobile users, some extreme use cases, and and our directors who want these nice shiny toys. I'm going to be joined today by somebody else who's going to take the counter argument, and that is my good friend over here, Mr. Brian.
Hi.
Hi. I don't know if you've known him or heard of him, but Brian, you might want to just give a 30-second view of what it is that you do.
I guess I didn't actually explain my job before. You know, my business card does not have a title on it, which is nice. And you know, I told you in some of the sessions yesterday, I began my career on the help desk and always doing sort of desktop support, but I've never actually worked in-house IT really beyond that first job I had. I've always worked for consulting companies, and then even now, it's hard to describe my job. I'm sort of like a journalist in some ways. You know, I don't want to use the word analyst because that's not quite accurate, and I don't know really like what analyst companies do, and so, but I'm kind of consulting, but I have to sort of be careful, like it's easy to kind of get in my own little world, and it's not sort of reality, because when you're sort of looking at all these vendors and all these kind of theoretical awesome solutions, that's one thing, but then sort of how you actually do that in the real world and what's possible to do in the real world. I don't know if you listen to that we do that podcast each week, Brian and Gabe Live, and Gabe and I, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, got into probably one of the biggest arguments of our careers over VPNs. And I was basically saying that you should use VPNs for everything. Just put the firewall around your servers and use the VPN on-premise, off-premise, everywhere. And he was saying that wasn't really practical. And so there's a lot of what we do, that's I don't know, we try to sort of keep on taking it back to talk to real customers and find out what's actually practical to do in the real world, not what's sort of theoretically the best. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thanks, Brian. So, okay, so you got a clear picture of who we are. So the format of the session is I'm going to give a bit of a 5-minute pitch as to where I believe we are going and what I believe the reality of the situation is. Brian is going to do a 5-minute pitch on where he believes the future of your desktop applications and data are. And basically what we want from everybody here in this room is really to be an interactive session, okay? This is really meant to be for the next 20 minutes is we're going to be looking to find out what you guys think is the reality of the situation, where you think your desktop applications and data sit today. And, thanks, Brian. And then we'll do a summary at the end of what we think the general situation is. So it's going to be very quick fire. We've got about half an hour to really go through all of this. So, Brian, do you mind if I start and give my sort of viewpoint?
Please.
So I set it out, and I took a few extra sneaky seconds of where I thought the situation is. And really, I think that actually we are missing out on the 80% of the users that are out there in the world. 80% of the users are actually just task-based users, and we provide them a tool, and they go from one point to the next point. And actually, those user base are not moving off Windows for the next 10 years. I'm going to take the position that actually for the next 10 years, those users are going to be using the same workstations, the same desktops, the same tools that we currently have in place today, and actually it's going to be running Windows 7. And really, what I think a lot of the things that we're speaking about is actually that very small glacial layer around the edges of the mobile users. I know a few of you guys here from some organizations, and I know that you guys have large call centers and call center situations. How does mobility and how does Dropbox and how does all these wonderful things that we speak about in all these sessions actually really affect the users when they come to the use case, to their work? And I would actually sort of use this as an analogy. You know, the shovel has been around for a long time. And the shovel has been around for most probably, well over 1,000 years. And although we might have diggers in the world, those diggers are only used for certain big case scenarios, and still the shovel persists. And actually, are we worrying about giving our users shovels, or are we trying to give them all diggers to do a job that they only need a shovel to do? So that's my first point. So I would say from a desktop standpoint, I think the desktop is going to stay exactly as it is for the next point of view. From an application standpoint, somebody spoke to me and they said, it was a new vendor, and they said to me, Oren, they said, do you know what? Application development is now all about Android and iOS. 80% of applications, or 85% of applications are being deployed on Android and iOS. And I thought, well, who cares? Are those applications we care about? Android and iOS, who cares about, the little games that are being developed? Just because it's fueling application development, are those applications that are relevant to the enterprises that we all service and worry about? There are going to be some elements of use cases, but actually, the applications we care about are still running on the platforms we service, which provide the tool sets which our users need to deliver the tool sets that they do. The last point that I'd make is about data. I love Dropbox. I'm a user of Dropbox. But actually, all of these things are inherently sort of have some serious security issues attached to them. Why are we providing mechanisms for our users when they come to work and do their job and they sit at a call desk, which is the 80% of the users? Why are we worrying, do they have capabilities around Dropbox? Why are we worrying about, do we worry about what's happening on their data? We've got perfectly easy ways of doing things, and I would actually point this as a statement, is that a complex system that works has usually derived from a simple system that works. And pretty much that sums up my argument and my standpoint on where I believe actually infrastructure is today. It's not that change isn't going to happen, it's that change is going to be happening in an incremental stage, and actually the big things that we speak about affect a very small percentage of the user base that we're worried about. Papow. Brian. I think it's compelling, my argument. Does everybody agree? Yeah, there we go. That's right, come on guys. I'm expecting a whole bunch of supporters for me when we get to the interactive piece of this, by the way.
Yeah, and fundamentally, I guess I don't disagree with too much of what you said, but there's sort of like an 80-20 rule in terms of efforts, and like in the case of shovels and diggers, it may be the case that shovels have been around for thousands of years, but because they've been around for thousands of years, they're very simple to implement, and we know what we're doing with them. So we don't have to all get around and plan a strategy around a shovel because everyone, the shovels are already there. So even if the digging machinery is only going to be 20% of our workforce needs that digging machinery, that's where we have to focus because there's so many more options and more power, and it's new, and there's all these evolutions and stuff. And that doesn't mean that we're trying to tell all of our shovel-wielding users they all need to switch over to digging machinery. But it does mean that at the conferences in the earth-moving industry, we're going to spend most of our time discussing the digging machinery because the shovels is, that's business as usual as it has been for the last 10,000 years. So, and that's kind of where we are now because for the users, you say 80% of the users are task workers. That seems high to me, but I guess the actual number doesn't matter. But it's agreed. There are some percentage of users who are task workers and who sit at a desk. They can use a locked down desktop. Because as you know, for me, and I say this again and again and again, but this whole consumerization thing is about more than devices, such as this. And I'm with you. Like it's not about, you talk about the mobile, but a lot of what we're trying to do is not because of these devices and these kinds of things.
But then why does it matter? I mean, what are we? I mean, why do we bother? Shouldn't most of this conference be around actually how do we do the basic things that we do?
Well, we already know how to do the basic things, so we don't need to get together and talk about it. And so and it may be the case. So if 80% of our users, let's call it that, it can be 50% or 2%, whatever, but if there are these users who use a locked down desktop, we can lock down their desktop, and that can be a terminal server-based desktop, it can be running locally on their machinery, it can be VDI, it doesn't matter. But if we lock it down, then yeah, we don't have to worry about Dropbox, we don't have to worry about them going to sites that we don't want them to, installing software. If we can completely lock those users down, then this is true, this is sort of a non-issue. But whatever percentage of our users that we can lock down, that is only a certain percentage. So again, if it's 10% or 80%, doesn't matter. We lock them down. We high five because we love it, because they're very easy. But we cannot lock down 100% of our users. Those of us who can lock down 100% of our users aren't here. And that's fine. Like, they're very lucky. We would love to have their jobs, although they can probably manage 20,000 users per admin because they're all locked down. So that's fine. And I'm not denying that this world exists where we can't completely lock down our users. But the users that we cannot completely lock down, whether it's 5% or 20% or 50% of those users, and there's various reasons we cannot lock them down. They are more knowledge-based workers. They need to have the ability to go do more things on their own and create content locally. They're the ones who are going to now start using all these cloud-based services. If we don't provide them, they'll use them on their own. They'll start using their devices. Even if you talk about iPads and stuff, you say, are we just pandering to the executives with iPads? Like, is it just an executive problem? Maybe, but the problem is the regulations don't have an asterisk that says, oh, if it's an executive, don't worry about it. Just let them do whatever they want. So if it's my job to enforce the regulations within my environment, notice I'm saying enforcing regulations, I'm not saying enforcing security, because as you know, these are two different things. So even if it is just a small percentage of my users, if it's my job to make sure that my organizational data has to be provided in a secure way, and the users are executive users with enough power, they can kind of say, yeah, screw you, if you don't, like, I'm using it on my iPad, so you figure out how to do it, or else I'll figure out how to do it on my own. Then I have to deal with that, regardless of if it's only 2%. So when I was mentioning the 80-20 thing earlier, it may be that 80% of our users, or the simple ones, only take 20% of our efforts, and we're doing all this now for just 20%, but that just 20% is taking 80% of our effort, and that's why we're here.
So what do you think in terms of the movement of actually the desktop, I mean the future of the desktop, in terms of how it impacts on the majority of the users that are out there?
Well, this goes back to like the session I did yesterday on what is a desktop, and if I'll sort of define desktop as the collection of applications and data and personality and that kind of stuff. And so it's, but so I'm sorry, I forgot what you asked.
I mean, how is the desktop going to evolve, in your opinion, for the base user? I mean, is it changing?
Okay, right. So
now for the base user, or are you sort of agreeing with me that actually the desktop that we deployed 5 years ago is the desktop that we're going to be deploying in 15 years from now?
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. When I was talking yesterday about the future desktop, and talked about like how we sort of look at our different users and put them into different groups. And remember, I've been talking about we've been grouping users for a long time, but I mentioned the stuff from the Cabinet Office and how they have that plan. This is the guy that got me the meeting with the Cabinet Office to have that conversation. So like, there's the backstory there. But remember, when they were looking at, they look at what where the user is, what types of applications do they use, how often do they use them, are they mobile or not, are they consuming content or creating content. So there's all these categorizations, and then based on certain combinations, we can say your type of user A, type B, type C, etc. So for the users that like you're describing, who are the basic users, task workers, whatever, we're going to define them like they work in a trusted location, they only use line of business applications, they use their machines all day, every day, they don't have the need to install their own stuff. For those users, we run them through our differencing engine that says what comes out, and it says, oh, a corporate delivered desktop to you is the way to do it. And then whether I deliver that corporate desktop with Windows running locally that's locked down, or VDI or terminal server, that's sort of a tactical technology thing on the backside. So that, in that sense, for IT to provide the desktop for that user, yeah, I'm with you on board. 10, 20 years we're still doing that, probably still on Windows 7, to be honest.
So what do you guys think out there? We're really, really good to get your guys' opinion. You guys are sort of working in the trenches, sitting there doing this stuff. What is happening in your guys' environments? I mean, what are you doing in terms of helping your users? I mean, is there anything that you're seeing in a trend, a change, happening in the way that you're servicing your users?
We're trying to drive paperless. iPads are really helping with that.
Can you tell? Are you able to tell us what industry and if so, what? Local government. Okay, so local government, and you're finding that paperless, and you've got iPads in your local government. And what type of people are using the iPad?
High volume paper.
So,
assistant directors, people who literally go home with this much paper at the end of the day, stuff they have to read.
okay.
The TCO and the ROI works out really well.
Are you going to be rolling that out to your basic to the people out that are out on the front line, or is this really an executive tool?
I think by encroachment and trickle down, and eventually, yes. But straight away, we're just focusing on where we can show a definitive ROI, and dropping the cost of paper out of business has been really good.
Yeah. Okay. You ready?
I would say information is key. The people that consume information, I work in for an investment research company, and so the 20% that are investment analysts, 9% that are investment analysts, are traveling a lot. The more information they have, the better investment decisions they're going to make, the more money the company's going to make. So when the iPad came out, we were a little unprepared for that. They all, pretty much 75% within 2 weeks had an iPad. And we're emailing company research to their Gmail accounts or whatever, because that access to that information directly equated to them doing a better job. When you're on the road so much, they're on an airplane or in a cab, they don't want to open up the laptop, or if they have a briefcase, they can only carry 15 pounds worth of paper. Instead, now they can have all of the research, all of their colleagues' research, all just within a quick search away.
So that kind of is that example I think I referenced yesterday, where it's like your users are going to be using their iPads, and it's your call as to whether they're using it in a way that's blessed by you or whether they're using it on their own.
Dropbox or Box.
Yeah, Gmail, yeah.
I guess even iPad users, I've got to say, I spoke to the CIO, and this doesn't help my case much, but I did speak to the CIO of a recruitment agency, and the recruitment agent said, you know what, we provide our users lockdown machines, everything, can't even screen scrape the machines. And so what happened, they had a little sales guy, 20-something-year-old guy, and he was out there, and he was going to leave the company and join another company, and do you know what he had? He had his own little iPhone, and taking photos of the screen, which had a little ICR app, which put it all into his contact database, and, screen scraping, lock down the desktop, who cares?
But I'll go to your point. I mean, so but to your point also, and that's a there's users that meet the use case for these types of where we need to provide these services to them. So the users who are running around with reams of paper and doing this sort of thing. But these users, both these cases, these guys are talking about iPads, and they have to provide iPads, and it's good for the business and everything. But that's the users they are providing iPads to, or the users where it makes sense. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some baseline of users who just sit in a desk and stare at a screen all day. And for them, us delivering a corporate Windows desktop has been fine for 20 years and will be fine for the next 20 years.
So I'm really interested in, I'm going to put somebody on the spot here just because I spoke to them earlier. Andy? Sorry, I won't mention which company you're from unless you're happy to, but you spoke to me earlier about a huge uptake in users on bringing their own sort of equipment into your work. And that is that the people, is that the executives bringing their devices in? And you spoke about a number of about 1,500, I think, if that's correct. Who are those people bringing those devices in that you're allowing onto your network?
So when we launched on the 12th of December, within 4 weeks of launch, we had over 500 people bringing in their own device. So this isn't a buy your own scheme, this is purely just bring your own device to work. Predominantly, as many organisations around, the iPad was a big driver. People wanted to bring their own, people have got an existing iPad, and wanted to bring it into the office. There was a big chunk of utilisation because people were doing it anyway. So there was 275 iPads on our network, and only about 50 of those were actually bought by our company. So a big part of that was utilisation.
Wow.
Within 3 months, we've now got over 1,500 people bringing in their own devices to work. Now that's a mixture of tablets, smartphones, and actually Macs all with those
Do you know what types of users are bringing in all these iPads and that? Is it the exec management? Is it across the spectrum that you've got?
It's across the organisation. So what we wanted to do is have a very inclusive approach. So we've driven the kind of demand initially was driven by senior executive managers, developers, people that wanted the latest gadgets. Well, you know, I want to bring my Mac to work. Well, when we've actually looked at the demographic as well, people register for the service on our portal, which registers their attributes in Active Directory, and we know what business you are from. And it's actually the operational, so IT is the biggest uptake, if you like, followed by our sales and marketing director, then followed by IT and HR. So it's a very broad spectrum across the organisation. We're now starting to see a trend towards customer services as well. So historically, they've been the kind of poorer citizens within the organisation who the devices they could use. So we're seeing quite a significant uptake now of people in our retail organisation, customer services.
And that's a fairly new program as well. So you know, such a huge uptake in a fairly new program is sort of starting to have a big effect. Okay.
And that's kind of, I'm sorry.
No, I just saw somebody.
I was just going to say a very similar case that we've seen. We don't actually have an official bring your own device strategy. But what we've done is we migrated 20,000 workstations, fat workstations to Windows 7. We also shifted from Lotus Notes to Office 365 dedicated. And what we've seen is into that environment, which is using our Active Directory from the Microsoft Data Center, we've now got something like 800 iPhones and 500 iPads connecting to our Link mobile and Exchange Online. None of those devices belong to our company at all. And but the good thing about it is the security is pushed down from that environment to the devices. So the remote wipes there, they need to have a secure password onto the device so you can get onto it in the first place, etc., etc. We're really seeing the demographic of that is completely random. We, you know, right across the world, age groups, whatever.
Are you able to say what industry you're in?
Yeah, paper and forestry.
Okay.
So we have a very interesting situation that we want people to buy paper, but we're also very much in the approach that we want people on the electronic side.
Yep.
It's a kind of win-lose-lose-win whatever situation.
There's a big user satisfaction thing as part of this. And did I tell the story last year about, I probably did, about Cement Australia, one of the companies where I did some work, and they basically said, because they have a program where they're trying to encourage workers to work at the company, and they said, you know, we make cement. We basically take big rocks, we grind them into dust, put them in bags and sell them. There's nothing interesting about that industry. And when you are trying to recruit from people out of university to say, come work there, in their case, it was as simple as giving their users Macs and iPhones. And this is probably 3 years ago now too, when this is a little bit, you know, to a 22-year-old working at a company, it's like 2-inch thick plastic with Windows laptop and BlackBerry, or Mac and iPhone, and that was what it took for them. So that could be something that we see. Like when you mention the diversity, it's interesting because by providing, like, you know, Office 365 and Link and the other things as that service, and then if the users are connecting, and like if you saw Jack's presentation earlier today, that gives you the remote wipe and stuff. It's nice because you don't have to pick. Like IT doesn't have to try and get out in front of the device picking game. If you can provide that service to them that they can connect in, you know, you want to buy something that you bought in Japan on your vacation that we never heard of. You know, if it connects in, then that makes you happy. You know, knock yourself out.
So we're running rapidly out of time. It's amazing how fast this time's go. But actually, I'm a huge believer that in the trickle-down factor, I think that yourself mentioned, you know, actually there is an impact to the users. And I'll speak about one project that's being worked on in central government. I've got to be very careful around what I say and what I don't say. But everything in government works towards, which you'll be aware of, impact levels, you know, where your data is impact level. And impact level 3 seems to be the thing that everybody wants to go towards. And there is a big project now in a very large government department. We're speaking up to 100,000 plus users, where they are actually looking to do away with even C drives, okay, and actually having a secure Dropbox type scenario for each of their users, using a technology, if I'm allowed to mention it, Nomadesk, that they're using that where they're starting to do that, where they're locking a corporate in a IL3 level information impact level 3 data center, combining that and actually just having users access this type of stuff where they can use this from this data center and still have all the capabilities to do remote wipe and starting to give this data out there. And this is going through to their task-based users. Okay. Now, we've got a very short time left, and if anybody wants to make another comment now before we start to summarize, now is your last time to do it. In a crowd full of silent people.
I want to comment that
Please. Say
the other, and it's not all about like so much FUIT stuff, but just to put that in there too, going back to the point about why we have to deal with this if 80% of our users are task users. On the one hand, I want to say yes, that these users who are task users, we can deliver an old-fashioned lockdown desktop to them, you know, as we've been doing, no problem. But they're able to buy iPads too. And so, you know, we want to make sure, like Jack actually, brother Jack, who is here, he had a job in college doing cold call, like sales calling, like phone type job, and they all used, he's always on Facebook at work, and I was asking how it's possible, and they just did it on his phone the whole time. So they block it on the computer because they want the employees to be productive, and he sits there with his headset and screen on one and on Facebook on his phone the whole time too. So on the one hand, even these task-based workers have the ability to like buy and bring in their own stuff that we have to sort of be ready to protect against. We can't just say, well, you're locked down, so you know we can ignore you.
Absolutely, and I'll even highlight that in a lot of government departments, especially at central government level, they disallow the use of the camera, but they don't disallow anybody bringing in their own phones.
So the phone in this pocket has no camera, but the iPhone with a much better quality camera, by the way, is fine.
It's absolutely crazy, and I say this quite openly because I quite openly say that to all of their management as well. But anyway, so I want to finalize the last and summarize the last little piece through the medium of dance, if you guys don't mind. Well, actually, I say dance. We'll do this through the medium of actually just sort of some sort of play, and I need a volunteer to really help me. In fact, I need 2 volunteers, and failing to volunteer, I'm only going to name some of the people that I know. Mark. Mark, come on, come up here, man. Come on, no, you can't refuse. This is live. Okay. So I need one other person. This is. Okay, come on then, Mike. Great. Okay, so what we've got is a true life experience of innovation entering into the market. Come, stand here, Mark. And this is an example that I used earlier. Mark here, dressed in green, is a farmer. And Mark farms every day his fields with some horses and a plow. Okay, wonderful, great scenario. You farm in your one field with a horse and plow. Mike over here. Mike is a nice new salesman, and Mike has some great new technology for this farmer to use. And this guy's technology happens to be a tractor. And use this analogy in your own lives in terms of IT. So Mike, can you explain to Mark why the use of your new technology is better than his horse and plow, his farm animals? And also, by the way, you guys are Mike's support team. So I would like, if Mike starts to struggle here, a couple of ideas from the floor would be great as to why this farmer should stop using his sort of horses and his plow. Come on, Mike, what are some things on the spot here?
Doesn't get tired. It keeps running. You can do so many more hectares with it a day than you can with a horse.
Can do so many more hectares. How many more hectares does your tractor do? How many more fields can he plow? Come on.
I would say 10 times the amount.
10 times the amount. Wow. 10 times the amount. Doesn't get tired. Any other benefit?
It doesn't eat. You're very unlikely to get kicked by it.
Yeah. What do you think, Mark? Sounds good. Oh, you're up for it already. Wow. Is this what we do in IT? Some new salesman shines a flashy sort of product in front of us and we go, flippin' heck, yeah. How many times does an IT salesman or IT technical guys come in front of you and say, this is how many more fields you're going to plow? You know? Buy it now. it's amazing. Okay, so you've sold already. Is there anything else from the floor as to why he should buy this? Anybody dissent why he shouldn't buy a tractor?
What if he has only a very small land and doesn't require that much power?
Okay, he might not require that much power. That's a good field. But in this case, he's got loads of land. Okay, we just say. But that is a very good point. Very good point.
Oil is very expensive.
Oil.
Oil, yeah, absolutely. That's very expensive. Yeah.
TCO and ROI.
TCO ROI. Geez, you've been listening to far too many sales pitches.
How does it work?
Okay, so let's go back to the truth, because this story is based on real life. Okay, so what really happened in the tractor scenario is, firstly, actually before we go there, firstly, as soon as this farmer buys his tractor, he's introducing complexity into his environment. Okay? He doesn't have the experience, he needs to have training, he needs to have skills, he needs to have backup and DR. What happens if his tractor goes down? He needs to have another tractor around, because it's not a horse, he's got, you can't just have there, he needs to have new fuel. Thanks guys, I'll do the rest, and otherwise you can just stand up. So he needs to do tractors, he needs to do fuel, all these wonderful things. But actually, what is the reality of the situation? What happened in the story of the tractor in reality? In reality, the story of the tractor was invented in the UK, and guess what? It failed. Absolutely failed. Nobody took it up. Now, the point being is, how many farmers do you go to and you see still plow their fields with tractors? I hasten to add, or I haven't seen one.
With horses.
So, yeah?
With horses, you mean?
With horses,
Yeah.
sorry, with horses, yes. Let me make sure that I'm getting it right. Okay, so we haven't seen one. Okay, so how did this happen, that if it didn't work, we're doing tractors? And the reason is actually that the tractor went to the States, the ground was a little bit harder, it didn't have enough power in the UK to drag through the muddy ground. The ground was a bit harder and it dragged, and the tractor became one of the engines that made America. It fueled the drive in agriculture. People started, the burgeoning population was starting to be fed by this rapidly, and it really, really grew and blossomed, and was actually one of the symbols of how America grew. And actually, when it came back to the UK, the tractor had been developed a little bit better, a bit stronger, could handle the ground and turf. And really, when I link that story to innovation, it isn't that innovation is not going to happen in your environment. It isn't that the changes in where your desktop, where your applications, where your data is at, is not going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just that what is the appropriate time that you take that change in your environment? Where is that going to happen? And really, my whole remit and CDG's whole remit is about speaking about innovation, speaking about change, speaking about those things. And really, the things that we complain against, and the things that I see as mistakes, is people choosing the wrong time to make that choice. And I do believe, from my own point of view, that change is happening even at the basic common level. But I think those changes are around the edges. It's evolution, not revolution. I guess, Brian, do you want to sort of make any final comments in terms of your final comments on this piece before we wrap up? We've got about 30 seconds.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think that's well said, because we can all definitely look at, like when we did yesterday, the desktop of the future, and say, yeah, we're going to get out of the Windows management business, and we're just going to deliver apps and data and all that sort of stuff to our users. Like, we can say that for sure that will happen in this planet. But does that mean we don't roll out Windows 7 in the same way we rolled out Windows XP? For most of us, probably not. Yeah. So I think that's well said, that like this is happening at some point, but whether we do that now, 5 years, 10 years, we'll have to sort of play it by ear and see what makes sense at the time.
Absolutely, and thanks, Mark. I'm sure we can send some great people with some nice shiny toys, and you can buy them as well. So yeah, guys, I think we're all on the same sheet on this. I mean, is there any comments or disagreements? And before we close up, nothing. Okay, great, guys. Thank you very, very much. I hope it was interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Oren, to CDG. By the way, I probably mentioned this last year. Oren with CDG was what made BriForum come to the UK. So last year's BriForum this year's BriForum wouldn't have happened if last year's BriForum didn't happen, and last year's BriForum would not have happened if this guy wasn't there. Like, that's a true story. So we have you to thank if we play it back.